Hey, it's Ed. I've got two quick announcements before we get started. First, I want to thank two brand new podcast supporters, Holly Wilkaszewski and Jeremy Crones. Both Holly and Jeremy signed up via Patreon to support the podcast on a monthly basis, and I really appreciate it. If you're interested in learning more about that, you can go to mountainandprairie.com/support. And the second announcement is very exciting. We are going to be doing a live podcast in Bozeman, Montana on August 30th. It's going to be really cool. It's going to be at the Ellen Theater in downtown Bozeman, and it's going to feature four of my past podcast guests that I'm pretty sure you have probably listened to those episodes. Kate Havstad, Jillian Lekuski, Becca Skinner, and Juanita Vero. We're going to be on stage talking about creativity, conservation, the West, favorite books. They're going to ask each other questions. It's going to be a really cool event, and a portion of the proceeds are going to be benefiting the Montana Land Reliance. I encourage you to go to the website and check it out. You can go to mountainandprairie.com/Bozeman. You can order tickets through there. The tickets are cheap, and they're actually selling really fast, which is cool. We sold like a quarter of the tickets in the first 48 hours, and the thing's 4 months off. So, not trying to give you a hard sales pitch here, but I would encourage you to grab a ticket or two if you're interested in going. I'd love to see you there. It'd be great to meet you in person. And again, I appreciate your constant support for this podcast. Thanks a lot. Hey, this is Ed Robertson, and this is the Mountain and Prairie Podcast, where I introduce you to some of the innovative individuals who are shaping the future of the American West. I meet most of these people through my work in land conservation or through my hobbies and interests that revolve around spending time up high in the mountains. My guests include ranchers, writers, entrepreneurs, conservationists, athletes, artists, adventurers, pretty much anyone who's doing important work, has an interesting story, and loves the American West. My guest today is Mary Rondepierre. Mary is a fourth-generation Montanan, avid sportswoman, and public lands advocate who's explored our nation's wild places from coast to coast. She's also the marketing and experiences manager at Filson, one of the most storied and respected outdoor apparel brands anywhere. Currently based in Seattle, Mary has managed to combine her personal and professional passions into an interesting and rewarding career that melds together high-performance business with conservation and time in wide open spaces. As a child, Mary grew up in a household that respected the outdoors and valued rich experiences over accumulating endless amounts of stuff. Her father worked as a commercial fisherman and logger, wearing Filson gear to his jobs in the often brutal environments of Alaska and the West. Mary headed to Oregon State for college and soon after graduation entered the apparel business, eventually landing at Filson. Since then, she's worn many hats at the company and now works closely with Filson's partnership with Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, helping to produce their Campfire Stories events around the country. If you're like me, love the outdoors, and own a ridiculously large stash of gear, odds are you've dreamed about working at a well-known outdoor apparel company. Mary's career serves as an excellent case study for anyone interested in pursuing this path, and she reveals how she managed to land such a dream job. We talk about her education and early career, as well as her decision to work retail at Filson in order to get her foot in the door. We talk about the important lessons she learned from working the sales floor and how those retail experiences inform and enhance her current role at Filson. We chat about an epic road trip she took with her husband in which they visited public lands from coast to coast. And we talk about how her upbringing in rural Montana instilled a deep love and respect of public lands. As usual, we discuss favorite books, places in the West, and the best advice she's ever received. Hope you enjoy. When you meet somebody for the first time and never met them before, like at a social event, and they ask you that question, what do you do? How do you answer that question?
Yeah, I am Filson's marketing and experiences manager. So what that means is, we have 17 retail stores. We are activating all over the country. So I'm helping manage all of the events the partnerships, the parties, the launches, all of that.
That's so cool. And I think that most people who listen to this are very familiar with Filson because there's so much overlap between your marketing reach and what you guys do, and then the interests that I have and that the people have on this podcast. But just in case there's like two people out there that don't know about Filson, can you describe the company and then we'll talk about the history of the company because I think that's super cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the history is definitely one of my favorite parts to talk about the brand. But, Filson began outfitting prospectors heading for the Klondike Gold Rush.
Yep.
And so, they were creating apparel and goods durable enough to withstand that crazy environment of the Yukon. So today we're still in Seattle. So about 122 years, still in Seattle manufacturing. We're a wholesaler. We've got all sorts of retail stores, and constantly developing new products, and also still making like all of that awesome stuff that, we were making in the early 1900s too. Are you familiar with the cruiser? Sorry, I'm like such a chatter. I could talk about Filson all day.
That's why I had you on here to chatter away. We can go for like 10 hours if you want. Yeah, let it rip.
Yeah. Are you familiar? Like 10 cloth, right?
Yes.
Wax canvas.
But
okay.
Explain that for people that don't.
Okay. So it is a rugged twill. It's a twill that has been waxed heavily. It was really it's the original rain jacket. This waxed twill was used as sails on sailboats.
Okay.
So it's very, very water resistant. It's very abrasion resistant. And it was basically, it was used before all these synthetic raincoats were made.
So that was the kind of the first big product that Filson came out with?
Well, we were working in wool before,
okay.
When they were outfitting folks that were heading up to the Yukon for the gold rush. But when the timber industry took off in the Pacific Northwest, C.C. Filson, Clinton Clarenor Filson was his name. Most people don't know that. He, started supporting the timber industry. They, it's the temperate here. It's it's wet. It's cold, you're walking through these really thick rainforests, big old growth forests. And that 10 cloth was the perfect material for jackets and pants here. They weren't ripping, they were keeping people dry.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I knew that Filson had been around for that long, but I never officially connected them with the Klondike Gold Rush. And I just recently read a book about that. And one of the main takeaways was that when you look at that Klondike Gold Rush and you look at the fortunes that were made or the lasting businesses that were made, there are very, very few, if any, fortunes that were made from actually mining gold out of the ground. But there were a lot of very sustainable businesses and kind of multi-generational empires that came from the people supplying those gold rushes. And I've thought about that, with the oil and gas industry out here in the West and how it's such a boom and bust thing, but the people supplying the services are the ones that can kind of keep a sustainable business. That's really interesting. I didn't realize that.
That's so true. What book were you reading?
It was called The Klondike Quest, and it's like a coffee table book with a bunch of photos in it. Somebody gave it to me, but it's really interesting. I'll link to that. So one thing that I admire I admire a lot about Filson, but and I'm generally very skeptical of companies, so I'm not just saying that. They're kind of there are very few companies that I admire, and Filson's one of them. And I'm always intrigued by how they've managed to compete in a market where the gear gets more and more and more high tech, like with Gore-Tex, then every variation of that. And it just seems like these jackets, for example, are just getting more and more like spacesuits, and Filson has kind of stayed. I mean, they're obviously improving their technology, but they've stayed basically or pretty basic compared to how they've always been. So what's the secret to that?
That's a really good question. Two parts. I think one is how we've managed to hold such a high standard for so long is humility. The legacy that we've inherited, and I mean we as in the people that are working for Filson right now from the founder, is like, in that quality and standard of the product. Like, people have confidence in our brand, and they know the quality.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what's kept us going for so long, is like that hasn't wavered.
Yep.
And then you asked about like high tech or synthetic materials. Is that
Sure.
right?
Yep. Yeah.
I think we actually say this a lot around the office, is like different jobs, different tools. Mm-hmm. So it's like, what worked then back in the day still works now for a lot of things. Mankind has been trying to make fibers that mimic wool, when like nothing manages moisture like wool.
Sure. That's exactly right.
Yeah, but also like that doesn't mean that these high-tech fibers aren't right for whatever that person's job is, or whatever they need that tool for. And that's, I think, what we like to create our products around, is like, what purpose does this product serve? It's very purpose driven. And so, different tools for different jobs.
Yeah, I learned that lesson the hard way when I moved out to Wyoming and started selling ranches. And on some of my first ranch tours, I was wearing like a high-tech puffy down coat. And it only took about trying to open a gate, barbed wire gate, like twice before I'd rip the thing to shreds.
Yep.
So I think that's a perfect example of that. Let's talk about the marketing real quick, because I feel like, not to talk about one of your competitors, but I don't even know if it is a competitor, but I so admire the marketing of Filson and of Patagonia, because I feel like they're both extremely authentic, kind of different ends of the outdoor world, but there's no shortage of authenticity in both of those companies, and it just really shines through. And so I know some folks that work at Patagonia, but you're the first person I've met that works at Filson. So can you just talk a little bit about how, it's a hard question, I guess, but how do y'all keep the marketing so authentic and have managed to do that for so long?
It is real people doing real things. Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds silly. Like, of course we would, but a lot of people are using models.
Oh, sure.
And I think the reason our campaigns are so incredible is because we don't hire models. Like, we feature experts in their field that are doing what they do, like when we're not following them around with a camera. Yeah. So I think like the types of characters Filson has encountered through this has been really incredible. And I think people can connect with it so quickly because it's obvious that like, that person really does that.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I think you can definitely tell, because a lot of the shots like in the catalog and things like that, they're actually like commercial fishermen on boats. And that's dangerous stuff. And I doubt many models would be able to get out there and do that. One other question about your specific job at Filson, and it's kind of the way we were connected, is because of the partnership that Filson has with Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. And I know that's been a really successful deal. And could you maybe just talk a little bit about that partnership and some of the things y'all have done together?
Oh, of course. Yeah. Filson is a very proud sponsor and friend of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. We value the work that they're doing to protect wildlife, public land, water. First I should say, are you totally familiar with BHA?
I'm pretty familiar, but in case people aren't, give us the overview. That'd be awesome.
Okay. I hope I do them justice.
You do better than I would.
So in short, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers is it's a nonpartisan group of sportsmen and sportswomen who are standing up for public land and for outdoor opportunities that are represented in that. And I think their main priority is to protect what little is left of our public lands heritage. Yep. So it's really like the sportsman's voice, but it's very inclusive. You think, because of the name Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, you think like, oh, it's just a bunch of hunters and anglers, but it's amazing what they've done. Like, I've met runners, I've met climbers, skiers that have gotten on board with this organization because they, respect the action that they're taking to protect these spaces.
Yeah, that's one of the bright sides of a lot of these controversies around public lands over the last few years with the latest president, because is that a lot of different ends of the outdoor spectrum seem to have come together and banded together to protect public lands. Groups that 5-6 years ago were probably at odds. Like I always say, like bird hunters and people from the Audubon Society are together, fighting for this common goal, which is cool. So what about Filson? Like, what has Filson done with BHA?
Yeah, so we 2 years ago we partnered up with them and are doing a series that we call Campfire Stories. So it's a public lands focused storytelling event series, very similar to the Moth.
Yeah,
if you're familiar with that, okay. But it's public land story based. We've done close to I think 20 or 30 storytelling events already with BHA. A lot of them hosted in our Filson retail stores across the country, breweries, outside parks and spaces, theaters. We've got one coming up in Bend at a theater downtown I'm really excited about. It's really been a fun partnership, and it's been really fun for, I think, the hunting industry as well to be able to have shed some really positive light on the sport of hunting.
Yes.
And be able to really explain to people what it is and why they do it and the science base behind it. Because I think, so many people, especially folks that grow up in the city and grow up in Seattle, don't know.
Yeah,
they didn't grow up around it.
Yeah, they don't fully understand it, and they think, I think they see kind of the mainstream version of it, like Ted Nugent, running around firing machine guns, and a lot of the people that you guys have had, you've had some of the same people that I've had on this podcast, and then other, pretty well-known folks who approach hunting with a very, very conservation kind of thoughtful mindset. So I have not yet been to one of those, but I've heard great things about them. And so when you're in Colorado, I'll be sure to come to one. So a lot of people, at least me, when I was in college and out of college, I just kind of had this dream of working at a big outdoor apparel company, whether it was Patagonia or Filson. It just seems like anybody who loves the outdoors would think that would be a super cool job. And I'm sure it is. But it's extremely competitive and hard to get in that world. So I'd love to talk a little bit about how you ended up in that job. So when did you first decide you wanted to work in the outdoor apparel industry?
I think I always have been interested in it. I mean, as long as I can remember, it was always a topic, not working in the industry, but gear and product was always a topic around the dinner table at my house growing up. Yeah. It was talked about as a tool, not fashion. By no means was my family talking about fashion. No offense to them, but
wait, and where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Northwest Montana.
Cool.
Yep. That's a little
hardcore
town called
country.
Big Fork.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful.
So again, talking about using product as a tool. My dad was constantly and still is tweaking his gear and his apparel to fit for the solution that he was going to be in. He has camps. I shouldn't be telling you guys this, but he has camps hidden all over Montana. He'll have, a raincoat, a, extra knife, shovel, food. He has canoes in Trees.
Does he really?
Somewhere. Oh yeah, all over the state of Montana. So it's just
awesome.
Total survival, dude. He's got it. He has it dialed. There's actually a couple of summers ago, a fire ripped through one of the areas that I know he had 2 camps in.
Uh-huh.
And he went back last summer and they were gone.
Really?
Yeah. So I was like, well, there's a couple $1,000 burnt up.
Well, not to veer too far off, but is your dad a Montana native, or did he move there? How did your family end up in Montana?
Yeah. No, my dad is a Montana native. I am fourth generation Montanan. So my dad's third.
Wow.
My great-grandfather came to Montana from Maine. He started hog farming not far out of Great Falls.
Yep.
Gosh, he raised 16 kids, which is just crazy. And my grandpa Lee was one of them.
Wow.
I know. But actually, my great-grandpa, he has the coolest name. And if I ever have a kid someday, I'm definitely going to use some of this. But his name was Lloyd Snow Hall.
Uh-huh.
And nobody knows why his middle name was Snow. But I heard he was he's tough as hell. So I don't know.
He would have to be tough. I mean, coming from Maine is hardcore enough, especially back in those days. And then moving out into the wilds of Montana, you just wonder how damn tough that guy was.
And to be a hog farmer.
Yes.
He's also a bootlegger. He got kicked out of Montana for a while. They gave him the option. They were like, okay, we'll put you in jail or you split, get out of here. So apparently he left, it was right at the end of the Prohibition. Cause I know my grandpa was born early 30s, so, wow. And he was born in Montana. So he had to have come back by then.
And so what did your dad do for a living, or what does he do for a living?
He has, he's an Alaska commercial fisherman, while I was growing up in my younger years. And then he was a logger for majority of my childhood, tree work. Now he's working for the electrical union.
Okay.
Operating cranes and heavy equipment. Yeah, building substations.
That is so hardcore because I'm from East North Carolina, and all my ancestors rode up the Cape Fear River in a boat in the 1600s. Wow. And they got off, and nobody left 150 mile radius until I moved to Jackson Hole in 2005.
No way. Oh, and did they just think you're crazy or what?
My parents are awesome, and they were completely supportive, but I'm sure people thought I was crazy because I was kind of late. I was 27 when I moved out, and everybody's like, what are you going out there to find yourself? I was like, no, I've actually got a real job. But I mean, and I thought I was hardcore moving out there in 2007. And I mean, that's just such a level. I mean, 2005, that's such a level of toughness in your family. So, I mean, did you grow up? Obviously, you grew up hunting, fishing, all that kind of stuff.
I definitely grew up in the woods with my dad and brother on all of their hunt trips. I actually didn't start hunting until I was out of the house.
Really?
Yeah. And that's kind of another story of how I got around to that. But yeah, I grew up horse showing, rodeoing, playing sports, playing in the woods, fishing, of course, with the family. A lot of shenanigans with the neighborhood friends, but yeah, we were just outside. That was all, that's all we did. Growing up in Montana, we didn't grow up on a huge piece of property, but it was state land, public land surrounded my folks' property. So it wasn't much time spent inside.
So when did you decide, I guess back to the career track, when did you decide that you would consider not living in Montana for a while? I mean, what took you? Because it seems like the route that you've ended up on, working with a big company, even though it's an awesome big company, it's just a lot different than a lot of what your family history has been. So how did that enter your mind?
That's a good question because I have thought about this question so much in the last 12 years. So I was I'm never leaving Montana, so I need to go to university outside of Montana because I need to be able to say I left once, I need to go get cultured. So I went to Corvallis, Oregon State University, which is funny that I went from one small town to the next. Getting to get cultured. But it was such a cool experience. I'm so glad I did leave. But what I'm getting to, I guess, is that I thought I'd go right back to Montana after college.
Yeah.
And we, in the program, so I studied merchandising management at Oregon State. And they require you to have a internship in order to graduate. Mm-hmm. And I got an internship in Santa Barbara, California.
Oh, wow.
The summer before graduation. So I went down there. It was with a company called Deckers.
Yeah.
So they own... are you familiar?
I am, yes.
Okay. So they own Teva, Hoka, UGG Australia. Who else?
They've made a lot of money off of me because of Hokas.
Oh my gosh!
I'm addicted to Hokas. I'm addicted to them. I cannot wear anything else.
No way.
And they have made, like, those things could cost $1,000 a pair, and I would still have to buy them because if I didn't wear those, my knees would not exist. I'd have to get my legs amputated. So yes, I know Deckers.
Okay, do you wear them to work?
I'm not that bad, but I probably will be soon though.
Okay. I bought my husband a pair actually for Valentine's Day this year.
Nice.
And I bought the all black ones. And they're waterproof. And I was like, okay, these are the least unattractive ones. Sorry, Hoka. And he will not take them off. And I'm like, dude, you cannot wear those out in public. But it's long gone. He's wearing them.
That's
but as
cool.
he says, he's like, Mary, you got to try these. Your knees are going to feel so much better. So
they're magic shoes. All right. So we could do a separate podcast just about my love of Hokas. But all right. So you went to work at Deckers. How was that?
I did. Oh my gosh, it was awesome. So I was under the UGG Australia. I don't even know why I'm saying UGG Australia. Everyone knows what UGG is. I was under the UGG umbrella.
Okay.
Which was incredible. So I've always worked in wool, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I was hired to be a product intern. So I just was there to do anything all summer. I did a lot of pairing two shoes together, lots of sampling.
Yeah.
It was so fun, but it was such an awesome experience to experience California, experience the central coast of California. I'm not sure if you've spent any time there.
I've not been that far south. I've spent a lot of time or some time up north, but not that far down south. I want to though. Yeah,
it's so special. The central coast is one of my favorite places in the country. We've got the Los Padres National Forest that basically bangs right up into the coast. It's oceans, mountains. Within 5 minutes, you can be on either.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so I really, really enjoyed that. Loved the opportunity at UGG. And when I was leaving for the end of the summer, which I still can't believe they wanted to hire me. I know I did a good job, but I had so much fun that summer. Oh man, they said, when you graduate, come back. We'd love to have you.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So, I moved down there right after college. So why I was saying this to you is that was the beginning of how I still have not returned.
Yeah.
home.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. I mean, I think Santa Barbara, I've never spent time there, but I've got a friend that lives there and it sounds just unbelievable. And being that close to water, I love to surf. So that's the only thing Colorado's missing is good ocean.
Totally.
When did Filson come on your radar as a legit job opportunity?
My husband and I were down in Santa Barbara. He got into naturopathic medical school up here in Seattle. And I have wanted to work for Filson since I was a kid, honestly. So I told you my dad was a logger. He would come home every day and he'd take off his tin cloth pants and his tin cloth jacket. And they were so stiff from being waxed for so many years and being wet. He could stand them up in the living room. Those are some of my earliest memories is with the brand. And so when Adam was like, I got in, let's do it. I was like, oh, well, I know where I'm going to work. I didn't know how I was going to get a job there, but I knew that that's where I wanted to work. So when we got up here, I walked into the Seattle Filson flagship store.
Yep.
And was just looking around. It's so beautiful. It's the quality of the product matches the quality of the building. Everything, every little detail. Most people say can I actually just move in? Yeah, we'll have to have you come down and check it out. It's incredible.
I've seen photos of it. It looks unbelievable.
Yeah, it is really, it's special. So, I looked online and saw that there weren't any positions open that were even relatively close to what I had done before. And so I was looking for other work in Seattle and just thought, well, shoot, like I might as well see if they'll let me work retail while I look for other jobs, and I can like finally, buy a bunch of Filson product if I can get a discount and like just learn more about the brand and like maybe I'll meet somebody.
Yeah.
So I've literally walked in and like met the store manager that day and I was like, can I work here? And he was like, let's sit down. So, I started 3 days later as part-time retail store staff.
So how long were you in retail until you moved over to the corporate side of things?
I don't remember. Probably 7 months, maybe. So I went from part-time to full-time to helping run the store, pretty quickly. Honestly, working retail, I don't know. Have you ever worked retail?
I have worked retail, and that was one of the things I wanted to ask you about because it was one of the most valuable experiences I've ever had, as far as just setting my priorities straight, because it's invaluable experience. What was your experience like doing retail?
Well, it was incredible. And I don't know if most people would say this, but it was, getting to meet, I feel very lucky that this was my first opportunity in retail, because getting to meet Filson customers is the coolest thing in the world, because their love for the brand is so, it's so personal, because most of our guests have, found out about the brand through an heirloom piece or a story they read or a campaign that they followed along with, that just cut to them.
Yep. So
that was super fun. And there's just the old timers too, the old timer crusty customers that have been coming into the Filson Seattle flagship store for a good 55 years.
Oh yeah. And I would guess that your experience with it and you've got a legitimate, authentic connection to it, like you were talking about with your dad and when he would come home. And I would guess that you can kind of connect over that in kind of a weird way. Don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You learn so much about the person by just the garment that they brought in. Like what the hobbies they're doing, how they make a living, what the hobbies are that they do on the weekends. It's bloodstained chaps equaled bird hunter or, hunter, or, tin cloth pants that were cut off at the bottoms. That guy's definitely a logger. Briefcase that was being brought in that they were just holding together. It was that briefcase has been carried by multiple generations,
That's another question I had just about the company in general is that it seems like a lot of companies now, their deal is make things with planned obsolescence in mind so that eventually you'll have to buy a new one in a few years. Whereas Filson seems to be the exact opposite of that, where they're like, we want you to buy one of these in your entire life, and then you give it to your kid, and then they can give it to their kid. And so, where does that, obviously, I guess it's just a corporate cultural thing, but where does that come from? Because it just goes in the face of a lot of standard business practices.
I think Filson just remains committed to producing unfailing goods, that are going to live up to our founder's promise.
I guess it's one of those things where it's very simple, but it's not very easy. Like the idea of it is very simple, but most companies can't do that, and Filson can, which is pretty neat. Back to the retail thing real quick.
Oh, so yeah.
Now that you're not in the retail side of things, but you're on the corporate side of things, how did that experience in retail, how does that kind of inform your daily work? How are you better at your job now because of that experience of 7 or 8 months doing retail?
Sure. Well, first I want to answer a little bit of your question beforehand.
Yeah.
I made retail sound so fluffy because of our customers, and yes, that was totally the positive part, but holy shit, working retail is the greatest thing for you to understand marketing, to understand their customer, to understand the products and why something sells over something else. And, you know, really learning to read people's body language and interpersonal communication, you know.
Sure.
And also, it's just hard. You're on your feet all day long. You're chipper. You're have a positive attitude. You need to genuinely be interested in the folks that you're talking to. And like your level of hospitality is like, you know, it needs to be on at all times. And I think that's something that I've carried into my personal life too, so much is it's like the level of hospitality that I learned from being, you know, running a retail store is incredible. You know, I feel like when people come into my house, I'm like, oh, I know, here's where you can put everything. And like, I already have sparkling water for you. Like, it's silly, but yeah, I've seen it carry over into my personal life so much.
One of the things I learned from it was just humility, because I worked at an outdoor gear store, kind of a local regional outdoor store in the Southeast. And, you know, most of the customers are so cool and, you know, common values, and you can talk to them about whatever outdoor thing they're doing. But like one out of 100 is the biggest asshole you've ever met. And in real life, you know, when I was a 20-year-old loudmouth college guy, like most of the time I would probably just be tempted to just let loose on somebody like that. But you can't. In a position like that, you know, if you're a responsible person and you're good at your job, you cannot do that, and you have to have a level of professionalism. And that was such a good lesson for me, just to kind of understand humility and understand that you can't always have your way, and things aren't going to always be exactly how I want them to be. And I understand. I've never waited tables, but I think it's the same. You get the same lesson there as well. Have you ever waited tables?
Oh yeah. Same thing. Yep.
Yeah, invaluable.
Yeah.
So,
you know, I was just thinking while you were saying that is, I think a lot of, you know, when you're put in a difficult situation, and that's usually when your true colors really shine. Yes. You know, like whether you're in the difficult situation in the woods or like at the retail store and some jerks, you know, yelling your head off, it's like, or yelling his head off, it's like, that's when your true colors shine, of like how you handle that as a human being. And I think those lessons are learned pretty quickly on the retail floor.
I agree. And I think you get better at it too. Like, I think every time something unpleasant like that happens, if you're focused, I think you can get a little bit better to handle. Like, you might not handle it perfectly one time, and then the next time you handle it a little bit better. So there's a skill there that can be acquired of dealing with difficult people. And I think that is a skill that all humans need, because there are a lot of damn difficult people. And unless you want to go around fighting all day, it's a good skill. Being able to placate those people is good. Thinking about your career, and so you went from working in the corporate side of things, then the retail, and then back into the corporate, and now you've been doing that for a while. And if somebody like a recent college graduate came to you and asked for advice on getting into the outdoor industry or the retail, the outdoor apparel industry, what would your advice be? Because you obviously did something right.
Gosh, well, from my experience, I would just say, like, pick a brand that you want to work for. Like, a lot of what I think how I ended up at Filson was totally manifesting, you know?
Yeah.
But also, like, pick a brand that aligns with your values and your passions. That's so huge. You know, it'll always come through in the work that you do. And, you know, show the company how you can be an asset and better the business, and like very much be willing to like take the part-time retail job just to get your foot in the door, or be the sample organizer for a shoe company, you know, just to like get in. And man, a good attitude will get you a really long way too. My buddy Evan, he's one of my favorite examples of someone that kind of worked their way, you know, a recent grad that worked their way into the outdoor apparel industry. Is he's been with Patagonia for 6 or 7 years now, I think. But he studied architecture in college, but wanted to work for Patagonia super bad. And he pursued them with like his innovations and his ideas until I think finally they just brought him in for an interview. Now he's the head designer for PAX and has been for a while.
Really?
So, yeah. So and I just love that story because he picked a brand and they aligned with his values and his passions. And, he did everything he could to get in the door.
Yeah. I mean, I think the way to think about it, or one way to think about it, is if it were easy, everybody would have that job. And so you really do have to stand out, whether it's, I thought it was two things about your story are cool is that you did that internship, which opened plenty of new opportunities. And then you worked retail for a while until you were able to get in onto the corporate side of things. And I think that is, it just shows a level of commitment to what you want to do. And I mean, I see that in the conservation. That's how I got into conservation. I mean, I was selling ranches and I just went to every single land trust when I moved to Colorado and was like, hey, let me know how I can help. I want to help, whatever I can do. And so on the side, I'd be doing projects. And over the course of years, it ended up being consulting projects that paid. And then it ended up being board positions. And then I decided I wanted to do it full time. And so, I mean, I think that going the extra mile is huge. Not that I'm a career counselor or have any idea what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'm not either. But we obviously both love what we do. And that'll get you somewhere.
I agree completely. I completely agree. So one more kind of career question. I don't know if you read many like business books or management books or anything like that. You just do it. You don't need to. See, I sit around reading and thinking all day. I should be just doing more. Well, I mean, are there any books that have come to mind that over your career in your life that you would say have contributed to your professional success?
Gosh, no, I don't read those kind of books. And I think, and this could be so wrong, but I think I do it on purpose.
What do you mean?
Because I don't know. I just think that like failing and asking, from my mentors and my peers and trial and error has just seemed to be my way of learning. Yeah. It's not right for everybody, but I think I've learned a lot through my mentors and observing, and being a manager, like you learn a lot through that.
Having to teach it versus just try to thinking you understand it. Teaching it to somebody is a whole different level.
Absolutely. I learned, I did yoga teacher training about, 4 years ago, I think now. Yep. And the amount of personal growth that I had through that experience was incredible. But I think a lot of my, at least managing skills have come from what I learned in that. And that might just sound like totally cliche. And I'm not like a total woo-woo manager by any means. Yeah. But I think just like being able to connect with people and finding out what makes them tick and understanding that like what motivates me may not motivate somebody else. Mm-hmm. And yeah, just learning through that. I think, gosh, I learned so much in that teacher training about how to deal with others, which was so surprising.
No, that makes sense. And I completely agree with your thing about experience and trial and error and figuring it out. Because I think sometimes I used to read a lot of these business books, and I think in some ways they can just be a distraction from actually doing stuff. Because in the end, the only way you're going to learn how to do it is by doing it. I mean, you can halfway prepare, but think about running and like Hokas and stuff. Like I could read a million books about how to run ultra marathons, but until you go out there, get off your ass. Yeah, every weekend and like throw up in the woods a few times and mess up your knees, you're not gonna be able to run an ultra marathon. And so, I mean, the books maybe help a little bit, but it's all about busting your ass, I think.
Yep, it is.
All right. So your job, it combines this career you've built in the outdoor apparel world, and then some of that crosses over with your love for public lands, which were a big part of your youth. And then when we were talking the other day, you mentioned this epic road trip that you and your husband did, kind of featuring public lands. So tell me about that.
Yeah, sure.
Again.
Yeah, that's okay. So yeah, I had after college, worked for UGG for about 4.5 years, I think. I met my husband down there in Santa Barbara.
Okay.
He, so Montana girl, moved to Santa Barbara. I was like, okay, I need to learn how to surf. I need to learn how to dive and like fish in the ocean, all these things. And 4th of July barbecue. This guy is like across the park from me, and I asked all these girls next to me, I was like, who's that guy? I'm like, oh, I think his name's Rondo. And I like yell Rondo and like throw him the Frisbee. And I don't know why I'm telling you my love story either, because it's not the question you asked.
No, keep it going. I want to hear it.
But he caught the Frisbee, and like really within 30 minutes, we were basically like standing a foot away from each other, like passing the Frisbee back and forth. And he was like, oh, I'll teach you how to surf. I'll, like all this stuff.
Yeah.
So that's why I ended up really sticking around Santa Barbara for so long. But what we totally connected on, other than he was reading Lonesome Dove at the time, and he was like, I've never met anyone from Montana before. So I hooked him with that.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. But we had the same dream of quitting our jobs. He'd worked in the surf industry for like 8 years by that time. We had the same dream of quitting our jobs and traveling the U.S. for a year. We both called it, this is the weirdest thing too, is we both called it our first retirement.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we started like dreaming over what kind of rig we would want to take. He's like surfer, obviously. So he's like built out van, all this. And I'm a country girl. And I was like, I want to restore a 1970s trailer, pull it with my truck. Like that's what I envisioned.
Yeah.
And so of course I won. We finally found a 1971 Shasta, like somewhere in the desert in Arizona, because it was finally the first one we found that like wasn't completely rotted out,
Yeah.
So we restored that and quit our jobs and just traveled around the U.S. I counted this. I think this is when you and I spoke. I was just doing a storytelling night, and I kept a journal every night where we slept, and we had spent 183 nights, I think, on public land that entire year.
That is so cool.
It was so cool.
Like, so what was, all right, I love asking people this question about everything. It's just like get straight down to the business. What was the craziest thing that happened the entire trip? Like you meet any real lunatic people, or did anything just really scary or funny? What was the craziest thing?
Yeah. It was actually, we didn't have like any one wild story, which I'm not bummed about.
That's probably good.
Yeah, because it was really good. Especially like, we were sleeping in a twin bed for an entire year with our dogs. So it was like the three of us.
How many
pump
dogs?
Sink. Just one, and he's small. He's a little street rat.
Cool.
Yeah, but it was a pump sink. We had no shower, no toilet. Like, I used a baby wipes and a garden shovel for an entire year. And like nothing crazy happened. I guess the craziest thing would be I remember before we left for the trip, we were looking at an atlas that we kind of kept in the truck to mark places where we slept and all that. And we saw Maine on the map, and neither of us had spent much time on the East Coast.
Yeah. And
we were like, whoa, like if we can make it to Maine, we can do anything. And which is silly. And when we actually got to Maine, it was probably 8 months later, on the trip, and a huge snowstorm. So we spent the spring. We left in the spring. Spent the whole spring in the Southwest, which is just incredible. Living in Colorado in the spring is just, gosh, you're so lucky. And then we spent the whole summer going up the West Coast, the fall in Montana, because like there's nowhere better to be than Montana in the fall.
Yeah, I agree.
And then busted over to the East Coast, trying to get to Maine before the snow fell. Mm-hmm. And we got to Maine, and we're like, whoa, we can do anything. And it's snowing, like crazy, crazy snow. And we're supposed to go to Acadia National Park. Like that was the one place that we were like, if we can make it there, we can do anything. And it's this crazy snowstorm. And Adam is like, we were pulling this tin can on wheels behind us. Uh-huh. And I'm like, dude, let's just pull over. Let's just have a night here. Like, we'll let the storm pass, and then we'll make it up to Acadia if there's not too much snow. And he was just, like, being super stubborn. And he's the most patient man in the entire world. And was like, no, we're going. And was, like, white-knuckling it. And the trailer is literally, like, swinging behind us. We make it to Acadia, and this was early in the morning. We make it there. Nobody's there. Mm-hmm. Park's like only a part of it is open. And I was kind of bugging at him about it the whole time because I was like, why are we doing this? Like, this just doesn't seem like the right time to be heading up there. We got our trailer is our home, so we're also taking that into consideration. Like, we got to be careful with this thing. Anyhow, so we get up into the park and he proposed. And,
oh, wow.
Yeah, and that was why he wanted to get there, because he remembered our conversation saying, like, if we can make it to Maine, we can do anything. So
Did you feel really bad for giving him a hard time?
Oh, totally. Oh, yeah. And, of course, poor guy is, like, probably so nervous. And
he was so nervous.
Totally. We didn't really, like, talk a ton about getting married either. And so, and I was stoked and still am stoked, but
that's awesome.
That was pretty crazy. So it was definitely,
he must be patient because there's no telling how long he had that ring from I'm not joking. From the moment I got my hands on the ring until I proposed to my wife, it was like 5 minutes. Because I gotten it, and then I had my parents bring it, and then my dad gave it to me. I was like, all right, and I walked upstairs and did it.
No way! That is too funny.
I'm the least patient person you've ever met. So kind of two ends of the spectrum.
How long have y'all been married?
We are coming up on 10 years. It'll be 10 years this summer, which is awesome. It's flown. It's crazy.
Good job.
And there are 2 humans on this earth because of it too, which is wild.
Wow. Yeah. You got baby girls, right?
Baby girls. Yeah. They're hilarious.
Yeah,
they're
cool.
complete. One of them, well, I'll spare you all that. I don't want to scare you off from having kids. It's awesome. I highly recommend it. So, all right, thinking about that big road trip, and when it's all said and done, I mean, you grew up living an adventurous childhood by any standard of Americans, but like, how were you different when you got back from that trip? Because that's a formative experience for you, and then for you and your husband's relationship. And I mean, I think there's a lot that can be learned from experiences like that. So, I mean, were there any big takeaways from it?
I think it's like I really learned the quality of items in my life, like what's necessary, or what's necessary to have, like for to stay alive, and then like for your happiness. We've always lived in really small places. Lived in a garage, a little like beach bungalow in Santa Barbara, a tiny cabin. Now we live in a tiny apartment in Seattle. And I think I wouldn't have it any other way. Like, I think what I learned from that time in the trailer was to own the things that you need in order to stay happy and survive, and that they better be high quality. They better be built to last.
Yeah, it definitely goes directly back to, or goes forward to what you're doing now. That's a great. Had you always been like that though, or did that change?
Oh yeah. No. For the most part, I think, I grew up that way for the most part. My folks are very much like that too. But I kind of always want the feeling of to know that, like, I can pack up my entire house in half a day, Yes, I do know. I think that's, well, I mean, and the thing is, I think you need to be reminded of that, because just general American society, like if you think about, if you just go with the flow, you're going to end up owning a lot of crap and a lot of cheaply made crap. And so I think getting a little reminder every now and then, which it sounds like that trip was a great reminder and a great way to kind of start your life together with your husband. My wife and I had a similar experience in Costa Rica. We lived down there for the first year of our marriage, and really,
I was not at all like a wanted a bunch of stuff, but I had too much stuff. And living down there, I talked about that on one of my recent podcasts with Jessica Lewis. And it seems like that theme comes up time and again with people that I have on here, is just not owning a lot of junk, which I think is very admirable.
Yeah, I think valuing it, people are starting to, or I hope are starting to value experience over things.
Yeah, I think so. I think you have to. And so Montana, you've traveled around the country. Now you're in the Pacific Northwest, and I love the Pacific Northwest. I think it's so special and unique, and it toughens you up, or toughened me up so much. Give me just a few of your favorite spots in the Pacific Northwest, because I think you're the first person I've had on here who lives and works in Seattle. I had
no way. Okay.
Bryce grew up there, but otherwise, yeah. So what's some of your favorite spots around there?
Yep. Who I met Bryce the other night.
And you still came on the podcast? That's good.
I did. His Down from the Mountain book, I started it Down from the Mountain.
Yeah,
Is that
that's
right?
it. Yep.
Yeah, I started reading it last night. But Bad Luck Way, his first book, I read it probably 3 or 4 years ago. God, it was such a good book. So I was really happy to listen to him on your podcast. And then also, he happened to be at Elliott Bay Books in Seattle that night, which is really like, I never lived in a city before, and having a large independent bookstore in your city is like the coolest thing. I can go up there and just get lost for hours and go meet people like Bryce, that are just popping through, and yeah, it's so cool. So other than the bookstore, I really love the Olympic Peninsula.
Yes.
I grew up in Montana, got to, eat all the bear and elk and deer I could have ever, wanted, and spent all the time in the woods. And not all that I've ever wanted, because I still want that.
Yeah.
But I've gotten that experience, and I'm going to continue to have that experience in my life. And getting to go out to the Olympic Peninsula is such a gift. I mean, it is, talking about like rugged, you cannot be a wussy out there.
No.
Like, the weather is so unforgiving. It's just wet, it's cold, it's windy, but the amount of food that comes, like the grocery shopping on the Olympic Peninsula, is so good. I mean, like oysters, clams, razor clams, squid, salmon. I mean, everything. It's so amazing. And I know that like someday when we move back to Montana, like I will miss that so much. That's definitely my favorite part for sure.
Yeah.
We went razor clamming a couple weekends ago, and got our limit and cleaned them right away, and just blanched them and ate them right then. And I was like, man, like sitting high on the hog out here. It was pretty cool.
That's super cool. I did a semester at Knowles during college, the National Outdoor Leadership School, and we were in the Pacific Northwest, and I went there for the mountain climbing stuff, but we spent like 2.5, 3 weeks on the Olympic Peninsula, and that was hands down the coolest part of the trip. I mean, the weather, the wildlife, like when you're walking along the beach and you have to time your hikes because of the tides, because if you don't, all those trees will start moving around and smash you. I mean, it is hardcore.
Death logs.
Yes. I mean, that I couldn't believe it. I really couldn't believe it. And just like you'd be walking along and you hear a noise behind a rock and you look, there's like a baby seal hanging out back there, and the mom's out fishing. And that's really unique place. How do you deal with the rain? Yeah, Roosevelt elk. That was the first time I ever saw one of those. How do you deal with the rain? Can you deal with it all right?
Oh yeah, I think it's all about the clothes you're wearing. It's like Filson. As long as you, exactly. But yeah, even if you've got wool base layers and something that's gonna keep you dry on top, there's no reason for that to stop you from getting outside. I think it's a choice. Like, it's so easy, especially when you're living in the city. It's so easy to like get up and look out the window and it's rainy, to like not want to go get outside. But my husband and I, when we moved here, actually, because I think it was going to be harder for him coming from Santa Barbara to here than it would be for me. And we decided, this is so cheesy, but we decided that whoever woke up first and it was raining outside had to come into the room and be like, guess what? It's raining. So that we would like reverse psychology, like that feeling of not wanting to go get outside.
Oh yeah, that's all. I might need to do that, whether it's with cold or anything that I don't like. That's awesome. So one more kind of broad question. You mentioned mentors in work, and do you have? I mean, who are your mentors or heroes? And they could be people you've never met. Like I'm abnormally obsessed with Theodore Roosevelt.
Yes.
Like to the point that it's starting to weird out my family. But like, who are yours?
Yeah, I'll answer that in a second. But have you been to? This was so cool. Okay, so Filson opened a New York flagship store in Union Square in November. So I got to be out pretty much in New York for a couple weeks in November, getting that open, having grand opening parties, and literally around the block from our Union Square store is Teddy Roosevelt's house, like where he was born.
Where he was born, yeah.
Where he rose. Have you been in there?
I have not been there, and I haven't been to Sagamore Hill, which is where his home as an adult. I haven't been to either of those because I haven't been to New York. I bet I haven't been to New York in like 17 years, 15 years. That shows how old I am. But I just, for some reason, with all my work travel and everything, I haven't been there. And so I really need to get there because I want to see all of it. I just need to go just to do that stuff, actually.
Honestly, that's like, I'm there for work, and that's usually the only reason why, but I try to squeeze in one day of like Natural History Museum.
Yep.
Always.
Which is TR's dad incredible. Started.
Exactly.
Yes.
And then, this last time I was there, got to go into, his home where he was raised. I actually got to go with Land Tawney, the president and CEO of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, who is, just as big of a Teddy fan as you are, or maybe even greater. So that was a really special experience to see that with him.
That's really cool. I've got a shirt from Backcountry Hunters and Anglers that has a picture of TR on it, and it says WWTRD, like what would TR do?
That's so good.
And it's really awesome and really nerdy.
Yeah, it is. You asked me about mentors.
Yeah.
So I've had so many wonderful examples in my life, but definitely the one that stands out for me is my big brother, Peter. So he's just a couple years older than me, and it was just the two of us. And he's been letting me follow him around in the woods forever. I'm still following him, honestly.
Nice.
He's patient, he's kind, he's funny. His integrity is unmatched.
Mm-hmm.
He gives the most sage, unemotional advice. He taught me how to fish, woodsmanship, and a lot. I would say why he is like my mentor, though, is like a lot of, while he was teaching me how to fish, how woodsmanship and how to, my dad mostly taught me how to hunt, but my brother spent a ton of time with me, dialing in my rifles and working on that kind of stuff. But the majority of how he's been a mentor to me is like the mental game that's involved in all of that stuff.
Yep.
He's just so cool and collected, and I think really taught me how to find that space in my life too.
The big brother. I'm a big brother.
You are.
Was he very protective of you?
No, not at all. Oh man, I dated all of his friends. Poor guy. Yeah, not at all. But I don't know. He trusts me though.
Yeah.
He's always trusted me. And that's what's so cool about our relationship. But I'd say the last thing, I would say one of the more important things that he taught me, from a very young age, was how to respect wildlife.
Uh-huh.
Just in the way he, when he would, when he'd harvest an animal, the way he treated it, the way, how he's used every single part of it, and always is learning more and trying to continue to use the entire animal. And he showed me how to do that from a very, very young age, except for ants. He was always blowing up anthills, but I don't know if that counts.
That's, he sounds like a great dude and a great mentor, and the definition of what a big brother should be. That's That's super cool. Well, we were already been talking for like an hour, which is nuts. But so can I run through? I've got some quick questions that I ask everybody.
Sure.
Or so I ask everybody some version of these. If we could go through those, and then I'll let you get on to your weekend. So we talked a little bit about books and our shared love of bookstores. I love local bookstores. And do you have any favorite books specifically related to the West?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, Jim Harrison, of course.
Yep.
Delva, Good Day to Die, Legends of the Fall, all of his poetry, even his writing about food. Ivan Doig, specifically This House of Sky.
Yes.
Have you read that? Okay.
I have not read it yet, and I have it on my shelf, thanks to somebody who was nice enough to send it to me. And it keeps coming up, and so I don't know why. I need to hurry up and read it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a memoir of his younger years growing up in the Smith River Valley, which my family, so that crazy great-grandfather, Lloyd Snow Hall that I was telling you about earlier, he actually had the insane foresight to purchase a homestead from someone back in the early 30s. So we still have that in our family out there in the Smith River Valley.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's incredible. But the story is of Ivan Doig growing up out there, being a ranch hand and like tending to the sheep with his father, and just the way he describes the landscape makes me homesick. But I would say most notably right now, I'm in love with Pam Houston. She just came out with a new book called Deep Creek. It's about like how buying a ranch that butts up to the national forest in Creede, Colorado, basically saved her life. You know when you fall in love with a book, so you automatically love everything else the author puts out.
Yes, I do know that.
Yeah, and so I think that's how it is for me and Pam. Like she wrote Cowboys Are My Weakness like 25 years ago, and I read it probably 13 years ago, and it was definitely like at the right time in my life when I read it. And it's one of those that I revisit every now and again. And so anything she writes, I just gobble it right up.
Yeah, several people recently have mentioned Deep Creek and said that it's really good. That's all. Yeah, and I know exactly what you mean about finding one book. That's how I'm with Hampton Sides books. I read Blood and Thunder, and every single one of his books is just awesome. What's your favorite book of all time? It doesn't have to be about the West.
Yeah, it's definitely This House of Sky.
Really?
Western, Landscape of the Western Mind. Oh, yeah.
Definitely. I had a woman on here named Sarah Calhoun who started the apparel company Red Ants Pants.
Oh, yeah. Oh, White Sulphur Springs.
Yes, yep. She moved there because of that book. Like that book is what led her there, and then she started a company. Like that book was responsible for kind of starting everything that she's done since, which I thought was pretty cool.
I did not know that part. I got to call her up because, oh man, and I want to live in White Sulphur Springs so bad. When I was called it a business trip when I took, or a sales trip, because like Adam loves the Flathead Valley where I grew up. You know, it's so beautiful there on the north end of Flathead Lake. There's nothing to not like about it.
Yep.
But I was like, ooh, I got to sell White Sulphur Springs to him. And we drove through and everything was like boarded up and you know, it was just looking like a ghost town. I was like, damn it. I swear that this is, I mean, that's what I like about it. But,
it's, she's, Sarah has done some cool stuff, you know, obviously with her company, but then just community development, economic development. So,
concert. Yeah,
she's a badass. All the outdoor experiences you've had, I mean, all over, you know, from Maine to Florida to, you know, in basically every corner of the country. Is there one that stands out as being the most powerful outdoor experience you've had? So, and that could be scary, funny, just a memorable, any come to mind?
Well, my favorite place in the whole world is the Bob Marshall Wilderness.
That comes up so many times on this podcast, and I've never been there.
It's it's the first place that I've ever been. And I, you know, standing in the middle being like, okay, like I feel pretty removed, you know, and that's such a good feeling.
Definitely.
But I would say like an experience that that I had was, and I think this has kind of played into who I am today, is I was really young and riding my mom's horse in the wilderness, or not in the wilderness. I was on national forest, not far from my folks' house, and I found a horse in the woods, and she was just like completely shriveled up. Her feet were totally overgrown. Her teeth looked awful. She was barely hanging on there. And I threw a rope around her and brought her home. And my mom says, I don't remember this. I was so young. And my mom says that I brought my mom a horse. And I was like, Mom, I've been praying to Jesus to bring me a horse. And he finally did. And my mom is like, oh my gosh, what is happening here? Like, what is this horse? Like, what, and like, oh gosh, the sweet girl's saying like, she's been praying for a horse and here she found it. So my folks ended up totally helping me rehabilitate this horse. I named her Hannah.
Really? That's so cool.
Yeah. And we put up signs all over the town, like, found horse, blah, blah, blah. It turns out, the county I grew up in is like free range, basically.
Yeah.
So, you can let if there's not a fence keeping something in, then it can go.
Sure.
And, someone was down on their luck and couldn't afford to feed the horse anymore. And it was winter and let it go. And my folks took it in and I rode her all summer and all fall. And she was looking healthy again. And I was riding back, heading to that same forest that I found her. And the owner pulled over and was like, that's my horse. Like, get the hell off my horse.
Whoa.
And I was just a little kid. And, told her, well, this is where I live. Like, I'll ride the horse back to my folks' house. And like, you talk with them about it. And, my parents ended up, they didn't want to get messed up in any of that situation. They didn't want to have, anything bad happen. And so they ended up giving the horse back. But I think through that situation, I just learned like how to care for an animal.
Sure.
How to care for a sick animal and like how to just deal with people in a lesser situation than you, or that maybe don't have the same knowledge that you have. It was just handled so beautifully. I was talking to my mom about that yesterday. That's the only reason why I brought that up. But
no, that's a great story. And that's completely unique to where you grew up. Because, I used to find like turtles and bring them home. And you found a horse.
That was silly. Yeah, really unique situation for sure. But
that's a great story. That's really neat. If you had to pick one place, where is your favorite place in the West?
Yeah, that cabin that we have on the Smith River, it just has so much family history, and it's bordered by national forests on both sides, and the river is incredible fishing. There's bear and elk and all sorts of night predators crawling through that place. It's just like the heartbeat of my family for sure.
That's really neat to have that. A cabin there would be cool in any fashion, but the fact that it's got that family history just adds layers to it. This is a hard one, but what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Well, this is one that my mom always, I feel like I've been talking about my folks a bunch, but that's okay. They're really good people.
Yeah, definitely.
My mom, and she'll still remind me of this, but she'll say, go take a good long look in the mirror. Mm-hmm. And, I think that's so important when you are in a situation that, isn't maybe going your way or whatever, just to go look at yourself first and see how you may have affected that.
I think that's very wise. I'd need to take that advice myself.
I do too. And it's always a good reminder. I need to record my mom saying that when she's gone someday so I can be reminded, Mary Margaret, you go take one good long look in the mirror.
So last kind of big question, if you could make a request or offer words of wisdom, what you just said is actually very, very, very wise. But if you could, make a request, words of wisdom, offer some advice to the people that listen to this podcast, and it's just people that love the West in one way or the other. Do you have any sage wisdom to offer?
Yeah, I think, we talked a lot about being outside, and I think it's our responsibility to ourselves to continue to return to the land for adventure and clarity and muscle strengthening, self-awareness for fun, whether that's getting food or just going out for a hike. And and in turn, it's also our responsibility to protect those places with our voice and the organizations we choose to participate in, the brands that we buy from, with our vote, so that, our children's children can continue to return to those places for adventure and clarity and muscle strengthening and fun.
I definitely agree with that, and I appreciate all the work you and your company do to help that happen. I mean, it requires effort. It's not going to happen on its own. So I appreciate all y'all are doing for that. How can people connect with you online, hassle you online? Are there any spots they should look?
Well, I would definitely say I would love for anyone interested to go look at Filson.com.
Yes.
That's not connecting with me, but just the brand. And I have Instagram.
I will link to your Instagram. I know where to find you on Instagram. So
okay, yeah.
I'll link to
it's
that.
Silly. I must have got in early on Instagram because my Instagram name is Long Hairs Don't Care. And that was totally my thing, It's like, sure, whatever. Long hair don't care. And somehow I got in on Instagram early enough to swoop in on that name, which is funny.
That's
I feel like
awesome.
I've outgrown it, but I never will.
No, you got to go with it. It's you.
Oh, exactly.
You go with it.
My hair's still long. The moment I cut my hair, that might need to happen.
Well, thank you for your time. This is really, really, really fun. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I feel like I want to switch roles with you next time. You have led such an interesting life and have seen so much. I want to ask so many questions about raising girls and how you want to raise them, in the woods, and what you're going to do to encourage them to, be stewards of the land. And
I told you though,
yeah.
I'm in witness relocation program, so I can't
right.
talk about myself at all. So I'm sorry. Well, maybe when we're not recording. Hey, it's Ed again. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast, and thanks for listening to that particular episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Before you go, I've got 3 quick things. Number 1, if you like the podcast, please do me a huge favor. Either pass it along to a friend who may be interested, share it on your social media, or go to iTunes and give it a 5-star review. All those things would mean a lot to me, and they would really help to spread the word about the podcast. Number 2, if you've listened to many of these episodes, you know that I love reading and I love talking about books. Every other month, I send out a quick email with a few books that I've recently read and highly recommend. The subjects are varied, but they're pretty much all nonfiction with an emphasis on history, biographies, adventure narratives, and topics related to the American West. There are no sales pitches for ranches, no spam, no other kind of nonsense, just books. So if you'd like to sign up for the list, head to Mountain and Prairie/reading, or just go to Mountain and Prairie and there's a massive tab at the top that says book recommendations. Click on it. There are a ton of good books that I've read. Some of the old email lists are on there. You can go crazy. There are a lot of books. And finally, if you know anyone I should interview for the podcast, please don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. All my contact info is at mountainandprairie.com, and I'm on all the social media stuff, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. So feel free to reach out. I'd love to have some recommendations and suggestions of interesting people I should meet. All right, that's it. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.